Having people come in and being able to give power to them and their story and take power away from the anxiety and the depression and the negative around it, really we can shift things, because we are pretty much just a collection of our experiences. So, if we're able to positively spin, there's no way of saying, my parents dying was a good thing, but me being right here, right now, in this present moment is an amazing thing. And so many things could be so different, but I am just very grateful that I have these opportunities to share, to grow, to develop.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Thank you for joining us on the podcast today. Today I have Zach Faerber. Zach is a young guest here that we have. I think you're one of the youngest guests I've had, Zach.
Oh, wow.
And Zach and I will be talking about his process with the death of both his parents and taking care of them and so forth. But Zach is right now also a medical anthropologist. I am so curious about this, and his goal is helping others. And you didn't add the part of all your fitness part here in your bio either, so we'll definitely talk about that as well. So you help people in many different ways, Zach, and I look forward to hearing more about your story and your journey and your growth process. So welcome, Zach.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kendra. I appreciate you making space for me.
Oh my goodness. No, it's like an honor always to hold space for somebody else and to be able to share people's stories. That's why the
Mm.
podcast was created. So thank you. Okay, Zach. So tell us about you and your upbringing. You have siblings. So tell us about you first, and then I'll take us through this journey here of asking certain questions, and then we'll see where it takes us.
Beautiful. Sounds great. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting kind of growing up as a sensitive man in a culture where sensitive men are not necessarily, put on a pedestal. So from a very early age, I was um, overtly sensitive, and I come from, both my parents were from the East Coast. My dad was, grew up in New York, hardcore Jewish entrepreneur who, worked 20 hours a day, didn't complain, just kind of got it done, and that was his mentality. And then my mom was kind of the shower with love type, so it was
Hmm.
a lot of hard love, being the firstborn from my father, and growing up, not necessarily being nudged in the nicest way, but definitely nudged in a way to be the best version of me. And then being kind of a little bit more sensitive and in tune with my emotions. My mother would always be the one to kind of like hold space for me and be there for me. So it's definitely interesting growing up, seeing how I came first, and then the middle child, my brother. Definitely a little bit more out there, aggressive. We called him like the monkey of the family, and then my sister was the perfect little angel. So, um, you
How
know,
far apart are you guys in
we're
age?
exactly 3 years
Each of
per.
you?
Yeah, it was like
Okay.
they planned. They definitely didn't plan me. I know that, but they planned the interval.
It's funny because when I got married, and I think it was when I was expecting our first, this lady that had already grown children said the best age difference between kids is 3 years. Just make sure, and that's how So I was like, okay, well, that's not what it's saying. My kids are 15 months apart, so
A
we
little
didn't
bit
follow
quicker.
her guidance. Yeah, we did half the time she mentioned.
Yeah.
Um, so you guys grew up then in New York, or is that just where they were from?
Yeah, so they were both from the East Coast. We actually grew up in Orange County, California. So um, it's Southern California. It's very when I people think of like TikTok houses or like little
Little
houses all look the
houses on
same.
the
Yeah,
hilltop.
exactly.
That song from that show,
Weeds.
Weeds. Yeah,
That's
that
always
intro.
what I think of.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like that the intro, like think of that. And I live in Texas, and it's actually Little House. It's also
very
like
similar.
little,
Oh
yeah.
my
So
God.
I understand, and I lived in California as well before.
Oh,
So
nice.
okay,
Very
so you're
curated space. Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yeah, it's all
definitely.
yeah, very planned neighborhoods in which you have certain builders that can do, and everything kind of looks alike. So you grew
Yeah.
up in Orange County in that way with your siblings, and then so middle school, high school. How was it growing up,
Yeah.
and at what point? I don't know which one of your parents was sick first, so take us into that dynamic too.
Yeah, so I mean, we were, like I said, my dad was a very hardworking entrepreneur. He found his kind of niche in the automotive industry, and before the stock market crash, like if you've ever seen James Bond or Fast and Furious, he was the one who kind of designed all the cars, brought them to the stage. Sometimes, if the stunt actors weren't there, he would have to drive them onto set.
How
So I
awesome!
know he was always coming home with different cars. He was very like flashy. It worked out very well for Orange County. Um, with that being said, it was always, I felt like it was like keeping up with the Millers type of scenario out there where, we were by all means stable middle class, but I got the opportunity to go, middle school was awesome. I had a great time, had a really good group of friends. And then high school, I got the opportunity to have a full scholarship to a private school out here, and it was the first time I really saw like class disparity and understanding that you could fit one of my house or three of my houses into one of my friends'
Mm,
houses, and it was kind of that feeling of not having enough
mm,
and being in all AP classes. So I was so busy and like trying to, as I said, my father put a lot of stress on me that you have to do well. You have to, if you're going to be in these scenarios. So I grew up very Jewish and very, those foundations, those principles kind of help to, we are the people that made it through so much. So it's like perseverance and grind and grit, and that was all kind of the mentality growing up. And I took that into high school, and that did not suit me well mentally. I
mm,
think point you want to be a kid, and I was freshman sophomore year that my dad got sick. So I was uh gosh, it's 2011, so he had been sick for a little while. So 2011, I was like 16. Yeah, so he had been sick on and off, and he was sick for about 7 years before he passed away with he had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
mhm,
So it's a blood cancer. He woke up one day just in a lot of pain. I still remember it was right before Halloween, so they had to take him in an ambulance, and he had a big tumor in his spleen, and they found out it had metastasized and gone into his lymph nodes. So he would go through like these spurts of being fine, getting chemotherapy, working through it, being in remission, and then wake up. And this happened 3 times. He came out of remission where he'd have like a big, I remember his eye. He had this big tumor behind his eye, so he woke up, and all of a sudden, like his eye was 3 times the size it's supposed to be. And as a kid, I'm trying to put my head down, work hard, and I just see, frustration, anger from my parents. That kind of stress can put a lot on a marriage, and so that seeing kind of the de- decomposing of a healthy relationship on top
mhm.
of watching
Of
him
the
get sick
health.
and better and sick and
Mhm,
better. Yeah, and it's so strange. Like looking back, feels like a different world because like it was so normal. Like, oh, dad's gonna go to the hospital. He was being treated at City of Hope. Dad's gonna go to the hospital for 6 months. Like he's just gonna go, and it's just like it was so normal. But I ended up sophomore year of high school. I was not doing well in school. I was doing drugs. I was unhappy. I mean, I look back on the pressure I put myself through, and I'm like, no wonder you're a 16-year-old kid dealing with your dad being sick, dealing with all these other external issues. Um, and I was pretty suicidal. Mental health was
Mhm.
definitely not great. So I ended up dropping out early and going to a program for mental health. And to this day, I credit that with a lot of the big shifts that I made in my life. Where it definitely started out with like take these pills, see what works, and then um, ended up getting off all antidepressant, all anti-anxiety medication, and kind of finding a rhythm for me that really supported growth and being that individual that I want to be, where the status quo is never seems to be good enough. So I think that's like the entrepreneurial side in me that I probably got from my dad, where it's like if you're not if you don't have your hand in 10 different cookie jars and still like brain's still working on new things, you're stagnant. Um, which
Yeah.
is and it, creates problems of mindful rest and all that, which I'm sure has caused some of the burnout in the past. But yeah, I mean, he got
Wow.
sick. It's 2011, and he ended up passing in. Excuse me, I apologize. Wow, he
The
got sick
dates,
in
dates, by the
2006.
way, that it's so
Yeah.
normal that dates become like a blur. It's happened several times that I ask people, like even like the dates of, and they're like so no, don't worry about it. It's
I
so normal.
literally got it tattooed. I have the
The-
tattoo
uh,
of my dad's passing and my mom's passing on my body, and I guess it's funny but not funny. My aunt's birthday is the same day my dad passed away. So
so it says May 25th. Let me see,
May
May
28th,
28th, 2011
2011,
is when he passed.
when he
So
passed.
diagnosed then 2000, and you said 7 years
6.
prior to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was
You were
younger. I
you were
apologize.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you were still not even graduated from high school at that point,
No, and I
well,
think that's yeah, I mean,
you had
that's
let me
yeah.
ask you, sorry, sorry,
No,
before
no, go
I
for it.
go into that wrap, you mentioned you in 10th grade is when you dropped from school to go into okay, so when you
Yeah.
dropped from school to go into, like, mental health support so forth, did you then finish your school, like, GED? Like, how did you finish your high school to then be able to continue then your furthering
Yeah,
education then?
I mean, I dropped out 2 weeks left in the semester, and my professors were really cool about it, and I mean, for any 16-year-old whose dad died, they were like, "Yeah, go do what you need to do."
Right.
And then I took the summer to really work on myself, going to therapy, and obviously things were changing. That was, we were still being affected by the stock market crash. The car industry went back to Detroit in 2008. So I have memories of my dad sitting in his hospital bed, trying to work from his hospital bed. The doctor's telling us, "Oh, there's a 3% chance that he dies from this, so you'll be fine." And us cashing out his life insurance policy early, so that we had some money to to get by. I mean, my mom was a or not a non-working mother, so he was the only source of income. And then for him to pass, we had no real assets at that point. We'd actually had someone stealing money from us at that time, which is a whole
Wow.
other story. Yeah, tends to happen when people are in vulnerable situations. So um, we lost our house 5 days after my dad died. We were evicted, so we had to get out. Um, so on top of dealing with his death, the fear in the Jewish religion,
Mhm.
you bury within a couple of days of somebody dying. So I just remember the love and support from the community at that point. I mean, I grew up very Jewish. I went to Jewish elementary school, and then as with everyone, you start testing your faith and getting. But it was just I get chills thinking about it. It was the hospital my dad was at. They
Mm.
used to say he must be like the holiest man in the world. I'm like, why? And they're like, well, he always has a different rabbi by his bedside. And I was in all the Orthodox camps and all of I was very active in the community when I was very young, and so all of these rabbis heard about what was going on and came and prayed and prayed and prayed. Um, but yeah, so I mean, he passed. We were evicted. I went into that program for most of the summer, and like I said, it really, really helped to kind of shift my mindset. That way, I ended up going to a public school for the rest of my high school experience, which uh, I'll say my coping mechanisms did not improve going to a school
Oh.
where,
Really? I was just
yeah.
gonna actually think if maybe if there was less pressure for you feeling like, because in the first one, And at first school, the pressure of you kind of trying to keep up, you got there into in a scholarship, right? So
Yeah,
that pressure there of your grades, of AP classes, all these kind of things, if that shifted how you felt then now in a school that maybe those
it's a little bit
expectations
different.
were not there, but it was not the case. Well, you also just have gone through a huge, you're the oldest of three kids, having, if you were what, 16 when your dad
Yeah,
died, your siblings
brother
were
was
just
13, and yeah, I
10.
mean, my sister wasn't even. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was that, still working through things with therapists and trying to figure out, but I mean, it wasn't even a year later my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. So it wasn't like, oh, she had a growth. It was like she this is like the worst non-small cell lung cancer, stage 4, and we're sitting there like, what? So I think that not even dealing with the grief of my dad, and there's a lot of not only his death, but his mentality, the stress that he created, the anger that resonated out of him for 7 years was, something I was still kind of trying to
Mm.
digest. And then on top of that, all of a sudden my mom's sick. And it went from 0 to 100 really quick. She didn't like my dad lost his hair. We had some fun little shaving parties for him, and it seemed to be like, all right, let's try to bring this a little bit of happiness into the situation. Whereas my mom, it was like, you're gonna die in 3 months. So
Did the doctor say that?
yeah,
Or did they
they
give her
said
that
three
time?
to 3 to 6 months
And
was the diagnosis.
and how many months did she live
She
after that
lived 3 years
diagnosis?
actually.
That's okay.
So
So
yeah.
that happens. It's not unlikely that those things happen. That's why I'm like, that's surprising that they gave her such a short window and not like a large, so that's, yeah.
Well, looking
So,
back now, I mean, and doing I'm kind of a nerd, and I really like to to study and learn and process things. So I mean, it was very aggressive, very fast staging cancer. Have no cancer all of a sudden to stage 4, they were like, if it's growing this fast. But a lot of there's a lot of issues with the medical system and how they diagnose, and so you know, there's a lot they weren't taking into account, like, you know, maybe she had been sitting at stage 4 for a while, or maybe, there were differing health factors, stress that was inducing it in the past, and now maybe she didn't necessarily need that. So, um, yeah, I mean, she was sick in, was it 2012 she got sick, and then she died in 2015. So she had three pretty good years. And most of them were from an experimental treatment, which was really cool. Experimental chemotherapy. Um, and like, she didn't lose her hair. She didn't, so she was pretty high functioning. Um, but I mean, it was a year or so where she was on that experimental treatment, and then as soon as with those studies, as soon as there's a negative, any kind of negative in the study, they kick you off because they don't want to
mm,
ruin the likelihood of the trial, going through to the FDA. So I took her to every one of her appointments. I was, in the room with her when the doctor came in and said, "Hey, your markers are looking lower this week. We're going to take you off." And she's like, "Well, what are my options?" And he's like, "I don't know. You got to go back to your oncologist and see. Thanks, bye." And so that was pretty. I mean, we were very fortunate to. We went to Hawaii as a family. We went, while she was sick, so the treatment really helped her. Um,
have
and
quality of
unfortunately,
life. Like it
yeah,
helped her have a quality of life with you guys for
totally,
those
totally.
3 years. Mm.
And I mean, unfortunately, I don't want to get too much into it, but my siblings, obviously being young the way they were, and drugs being prevalent in our home, and it was just not a good situation. One of my siblings is a recovering, addict, and because of these scenarios, the stress was put on him, the availability was there, and so it was like me trying to take care of her. My younger sister was still in high school. We were trying to figure out what she was doing and give her the best life that she could. And my brother was still in high school as well. And it quickly became like I graduated high school and put college on the back burner. I like to tell people I'm still waiting for Guinness to reach back out with my world record
Longest.
for longest in most community college. I attended 6 different colleges, so pretty
6
excited
different
about that
community
one.
colleges?
Six colleges total. So
Total.
4 community colleges and then 2 universities.
So I went
Um,
to 2 community
oh,
colleges
did you?
and 1
Okay.
university, so I'm halfway. I was you beat my world Guinness, and then
Doubled. How many years? How many years? That's the
oh,
question.
like 7.
Oh, you beat. So I did in
No,
six.
maybe not. Maybe
So
6. No, maybe it was 6. I'm trying
okay.
to think. Yeah, I started like at 20. I did like, a few courses, 20, and then graduated. Maybe I was 25. I don't remember. Maybe I was 25, 26. Anyway, it felt like forever, but anyway.
Well, especially when
Um,
you're that age too, like the paradigm there is like, wow, I am so old compared to people around me,
mhm.
and like this is such a step backwards in my life. Like I'm gonna be so far behind everybody, and it's just
Yeah,
so not
there are certain
true.
things. It's
Yeah.
doing a parenthesis here. There's that, but then also, for example, when I did go to the university, I went to Cal State Northridge. That's where I got my
Oh,
degree.
nice.
But so when I was at Cal State, by the time I got there, because I was 24 when I started there, I didn't
Mm,
have to put my parents' financial information for my FAFSA, my form.
there you
So
go.
I got my last 2 years. So I did graduate at 26. My last 2 years, I didn't it was paid
Not to pay.
before because I only had to put my own financial information. So that was in the state of California that it paid off to not do for to wait to 24 to do the last
Go.
2 years.
There you go. You heard it here first. This is the hacks, the free
The
college
hacks,
hack.
the
There you
seven
go.
year the 7 year route, 6 colleges or 3 colleges route. We still
Yeah.
end up okay.
Yeah.
So if parents have these high expectations of their kids of doing something a certain way, we all figure it out somewhere or another and end up at
Yeah.
some place. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Wow.
you had just a lot of pressure and responsibility. Not only were you then the caretaker to your dad when to your dad, to your mom, but then to your siblings, then also going to school. You took then a break a little bit for college, and then started then your route. But how who was supporting you as a family when you all like I know you had the community, the Jewish community, which you mentioned that when your dad passed away, did you have family that lived also in the area in Orange County, or was everybody in the East Coast? And how what did you guys
Yeah,
have?
so I actually was working 2 to 3 jobs at that point. My We do have family in Orange County, and they were helpful as they could be, but they're very, very busy as it is on their own. I mean, my uncle's a very I guess known surgeon, so he taking call all the time, and 2 kids, very busy. There's also seems like there's always added family drama when you're going through stuff. So there was like some family stuff that came up, and I think that kind of created a divide in the family. I mean, when tensions are high during those high stressful environments, it's so easy to take things personally. It's so easy to get upset. But yeah, I mean, we were lucky enough that we did have, we didn't run through all the life insurance that my dad had. So we had that buffer. But it wasn't a huge buffer. My mom was planning to go back to work, and to even work while she was sick. Um, but it never got to that point. So, we did have the community bringing us meals, spending holidays with family friends. It was difficult. And then when it did get to the point where she was really sick, I had a downstairs bedroom. I converted my room to a hospice
Hmm.
room, and we couldn't afford a full-time nurse, so we had a nurse at night with her. She liked to get up in the middle of the night, and she had a port, so it would administer any kind of medication directly to her heart. She liked to cut her IV in the middle of the night and walk around. Yeah, so I remember like she's like on her deathbed, practically. And I'm having these conversations with hospice companies, and they're like, "Yeah, if she keeps cutting her IV, we're gonna have to find her a new." And I was like sitting there, I'm like, "Mom, you can't." And she goes, it itches."
Oh,
And I'm like,
oh my
you're
goodness.
cutting the cord. You're not even like pulling it out. What are you? What? So it's
Yeah.
like, um, looking back now, it's comical. Um,
Mhm.
During the time of, it was not.
Frustrating, yeah,
Yeah.
frustrating, yeah, 'cause it
Um,
get
but yeah, I mean, I think that that was my biggest test personally, and honestly, I don't know that I would have had it any other way because I got to spend so much time. You never want to see, you don't ever want to have to like shower your mother and help her, feed her and whatever, but it it was very, I don't know, it almost felt like easier than my dad because at least she wasn't in the hospital all the time. I was spending time with her. I learned to navigate around, anytime somebody takes that much pain medication, mentally they change. So yes, she would say some hurtful things or whatever close to the end, but learning to navigate those, I just felt like I was in a much healthier place. Uh, Watching
to be
one
able to
parent
take it,
die
mhm.
it made it easier to watch the second parent die, unfortunately. But yeah, it was definitely a healthier scenario uh, in a non-healthy environment. I mean,
Wow.
yeah.
So, Zachary, here you are at that point then you were just, let me see, 20 probably when
Yeah,
your
my
mom.
mom passed 21. She
Yeah.
passed right after. So her birthday, it was beautiful. I did a so this is where like fitness came in. Was
Mhm.
I was so fixated on controlling what I could in my life that it became my therapy. I grew up playing ice hockey. I grew up very athletic. Um, and being able to like push myself to be better, I take things, like I said, I'm a little crazy. I like to like really do my research. I take things to the nth degree. So I ended up like, while she was in this like very sick time for her, I decided to do a bodybuilding show, while working 2, 3 jobs, going to community college, taking care of her. I was the guy who brought Tupperware everywhere with me. I was going to the gym at 2 a.m. whenever I could. I do miss that energy I had as a 21-year-old, but um, yeah, it was such a nice variable that I could control when everything
Mm.
else was in chaos. So I going a little extra in that route, I think, really helped to keep me mentally focused. And it was beautiful. My competition was on my 21st birthday, and my mother was able to make it. So I have a picture of her, and my coach and I standing there. I came in third place.
Congratulations. In your
Thank you.
first
Yeah,
competition? Mm.
yeah, yeah. So out of like 60 or so guys, it was pretty cool. Um, and you just see her she had her oxygen in, but she was able to come sit in the stands and cheer me on. And then my sister expedited her bat mitzvah and had that on my mom's birthday, which is August 31st. So my birthday is August 8th. My mom's was August 31st. She had her bat mitzvah, and then we had a party slash birthday party for my mom. And then she thought that was it. She's like, all right, I can go now. But she was a very, very stubborn woman, so she waited until December. But still, she deteriorated very quickly after that. So she was waiting for, these big momentous occasions
Mm.
where we had pictures and family was there, and people from the East Coast flew in for my sister's bar mitzvah, and it was beautiful. Um, and then, she was, God, I remember it's so hard to, she was supposed to pick a day to die at home because she didn't want to die in the hospital. And it's like, how do you? I was so mad at her for not picking a day, but how do you pick a day? You're like, all right, I'm gonna go today.
Right, right.
So the pain
It's
became intolerable, and we ended up rushing her to the hospital. And and my aunt, you know, bent over in the bed and said, "It's okay to leave. You can go now." And she just very peacefully went, um, which I didn't get into too much of my father, but it was not peaceful. He was, we had suction, and he was spewing blood a little bit everywhere. He had a failed stem cell transplant, so he actually died from graft versus host disease. Um, his brother, who was supposed to donate, ended up not being able to on the day of. So
Mhm.
they kind of had to make a pivot, and it
Didn't work
didn't,
out.
didn't work. So
Let's go into that because in the bio you sent me now, tell us how passionate you are then now about this aspect of stem cell and so forth, and just the fact of what you studied. So medical anthropology. Let's talk about that of because you're going through these deaths that of both your parents, this life experience that you went through, and that definitely shapes the direction in which you
mhm.
go, and it could go either way, right? So, would you have chosen medical anthropology as your degree, you know, or not, right? So,
Yeah.
tell us what it is, and also regarding stem cell research and donations and things like that, right? That is something that you help out with.
Yeah. So I mean, it's so funny because it's like it's just exactly what you're talking about, right? It's the intersection. Medical anthropology is really like the epidemiology and understanding of how medicine has come to be, how the human body works, and like the cultural anthropological aspects of understanding why we do what we do. So it's like my favorite, the body and the mind, like those two
Mm,
things and how they intersect and how they've been studied over time. And realistically, I was pre-med, so I was like,
okay.
what looks more competitive than biology? Because
Yeah.
everybody's a biology major. So um, I really thought my path was to become a physician and help people, and um, that didn't end up being the case, and I'm very
Yet,
happy. Well,
anyway, you never, at least that you don't, if that ends up being the route later on, you can choose
maybe
that.
a yeah, exactly, maybe PhD,
There you
but
go. Yeah.
I don't think MD is in the cards for me. Just yet. But yeah, I mean, it was so interesting to me to find an intersection of I didn't even know that was possible. So that's kind of why I went down that road, was to try to understand how treatments for things. I mean, I took a whole class about like learning about cancer and how it's formed and how it's treated, and it just blew my mind to, there's nothing like learning something being in the environment, like watching my parents and listening to all those hospital visits over time. I definitely picked up knowledge and was able to kind of like, whoa, I know a lot more than the average, 22-year-old knows about cancer
Mhm.
research and how cancer works. And I actually found, so City of Hope has a stem cell department. That's where my dad was treated, and it's through a program called Be the Match, which is an amazing nonprofit that helps donors match with. It's not just cancer. There's it's all blood cancers, and then sickle cell anemia. So anything that affects
The
um,
blood.
the
The
blood,
blood.
yeah,
Mhm.
and your genetics, and it's very interesting on a very very high level. It's just basically killing the patient, bringing their immunity down to zero, and introducing new stem cells into that patient and allowing them to rebuild.
Yeah.
You actually will change blood types to your donor's blood type. It's very,
Mhm.
very interesting. But in college, at the first school, I met a guy. Um, we're still very close, but I met him. He was in the Jewish fraternity. I was rushing, and one of the first events, I was like, asked my buddy, I was like, who is that guy? He was playing tackle football in the sand with pick lines in his arm, which are like another way of
Yeah.
administering
Uh-huh.
chemotherapy. And he's missing his eyebrows, and I'm like, so he's a cancer patient playing tackle football with the Jewish fraternity. I'm like, I got to know who this guy is. This was as my mom was sick. Come to find out, he he was treated at City of Hope. He actually was a successful stem cell recipient. He started a nonprofit that helped kids with funding for treatment, because it's still quite expensive. Um, but I just fell in love with the science, with the idea, with the understanding of like, wow, you can change your genetics, you can fix ailments. And I mean, we've come so far from, when my dad was sick in 2011, or when he passed in 2011, like to now, he would probably be living now if he was sick. Like to see the advances we're going through in these, um, and just to give people, there's always that red button topic of stem cells. It's not like embryonic stem cells, it's stem cells through your blood, so white blood cells. And now when you donate, a lot of people think, they go through bone marrow, but they actually are able to take your blood, run it through a machine, and take out the stem cells from your blood. They do have to give you a medication to kind of help boost the stem cells, but the process is painless and simple and easy. And um, anybody can join the registry. It's free. They'll send you a swab. You swab your mouth and send it back. And there's been over 100,000 people who've been saved today. And just that
Mhm.
idea of like literally stepping out of yourself and saving someone's life um, was just mind blowing to me. So I got the opportunity to work with them after college, and I was like, I am all in. This is amazing. And it was a lot of tough work. I mean, a lot of people don't realize it was a nonprofit sector of the hospital, and I was in charge of a very large territory, and I would basically just drive and get different schools and organizations involved and kind of do business development for them and tell my story and bring my passion to the environment. And um
And
yeah.
stories are really so important because it goes to the heart, right, of why it is something was started or like, and people do get inspired by that. So by you going and sharing your story and the fact that your dad's process kind of didn't end up working out because of failed stem cell, donation and so forth. It is inspiring for others. So
Totally.
that's amazing that your story is now saving other people's lives. So
Mm,
your parents' legacy lives on because of the choices you are also making
mm,
and saving others too. So I don't know. That's
wow.
how that's how I see it, at least of how you're sharing that. So thank you. Um, with in terms of tools with your grief journey, I just want to touch a little bit upon that about on that. Since we've talked about what it is you do now for others, you already mentioned some ways in which were not the healthiest per se coping mechanisms or with what you did, with drugs and the stress and depression
Mm,
and not healthy choices, but then kind of doing a U-turn there. Then the aspect of fitness then being something that was a way of you controlling a part,
yeah,
which can go either way as well in some people,
totally,
right? It could also
totally.
go in another direction. That aspect of food and exercise can go in an unhealthy route as well. In your case, it went into a healthy way of coping with what you were going through of the non aspect of control in your life. So what other tools that you use? You had your the community, then you had your school, you had your that you did you make it into your fraternity, into the rush you went into?
I did, and it was
Okay.
great because I
Was
was
that
able to stay even in junior college. They kept me on, and that was that. I mean, I still like talked to my friend yesterday who I rushed with, and it's like
so
that is
so
my
that's a support. So
community.
that's another,
Totally,
okay, that's your other
totally.
community there. Okay. So tell us then a little more about that. What other ways what other tools did you use?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Or
just
keep using.
yeah, I was gonna say just being. I mean, it's interesting how in life you don't always get what you think you're gonna get, but you think you usually get what you need. So like scrolling on Instagram and finding you, it's like I've worked with a few different nonprofits. I've told my story on stage. I like to tell people like I opened up for Dana Carvey. I don't know if you know who that is from like Wayne's World and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was amazing experience to be able to like be at this men's group and have these conversations. And that's I'm very passionate about fostering those kind of environments, and I think that's been a huge shift for me, which is being vulnerable and talking about these things and holding space for others to do the same, because it's such a right, you take the power away from the situation, from the words, if you're able to kind of talk about it. And so that's kind of been, on top of you mentioned the fitness, and I think, that was definitely a little unhealthy when it first started. And now, I've found that to a therapeutic rhythm in that, right? And adding in breath work and adding in meditation and adding in these different tools and components that really help to calm your nervous system. Um, but just learning to be in the emotion and be around people when they're in the emotion, and to be very present and give that space, because I learned very quickly with my father's death, if you don't, it bottles up, you get anxious, you get stressed, you get, just angry. And I feel like every time I have one of these conversations, and I really appreciate you like I said, creating that space, because it's not just me. It's like having people come in and being able to give power to them and their story, and take power away from the anxiety and the depression and the negative around it. Really, we can shift things, because we are pretty much just a collection of our experiences. So, if we're able to positively spin, there's no way of saying, my parents dying was a good thing, but me being right here, right now, in this present moment is an amazing thing. Um,
Mm.
and so many things could be so different, but I am just very grateful that I have these opportunities to share, to grow, to develop. I think my tools can borderline on unhealthy, but all of it is in the foundation of personal growth, right? That's what
That
excites me.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's at the and when we say healthy, unhealthy, it's like it's a matter it's kind of like saying healthy food or not healthy food. That I mean, it is the food, right? It's
yeah,
food, right? So
exactly.
it's like that's the thing with same with choices for someone else. That is just the way that they can cope. So that is way better than the alternative, so
Totally.
that's the thing. So when I was trying to say that regarding the control, I wasn't trying to make judgment on that aspect of
No,
of,
no, I
of
didn't feel
physical
that.
fitness, but
Yeah.
that in general in the health and fitness world, a lot of times things can go too extreme in either way, right? So that's
Well,
why
that's
I
the
was kind
problem.
of
It's the noise. I mean, it's the people are so confused and anxious, and you know, I used to work in the supplement industry, and it's just the idea that this is now something that is peddled down for everyone. It's like, no, it's supplemental to what you're doing. It's not
Mhm.
meant to. So, it's the same thing, like you're saying, right? There's a healthy way of finding that. And then, that's what I kind of help my clients with, is like, you shouldn't be killing yourself for 3 months to look good on the beach one day. You should
Yeah.
have a mindful
Sustainable
practice.
lifestyle. Yeah, a
Exactly,
sustainable
exactly.
lifestyle. And you mentioned something else before too, which is the aspect of the mind component, the community part. It's not just one way, right? Like it's not just like what you put in your
Hmm.
mouth or the output in the gym. Is are you surrounding yourself with people around you that are making you smile? The community, like you were
Mm,
talking about before, the those social components that are so important in
totally.
our lives, that so
Especially now with COVID and everything. And I listened to something the other day that I feel called to kind of share, is
please.
not just, right, the social environment, but they were talking about having a picture of them as a young adult or a young child, sitting present on their desk, like one of their proudest moments, and to think like, what would that child say about you? Because, it's so important. I know a lot of people talk about like inner child work, or like,
Mhm.
making sure that you're staying connected, but just like, would young you be proud of you right now? Are you doing and fulfilling everything that we so often get, you know, distracted by the carrot in front of us, that we forget what's surrounding us. So, um, I thought that was very beautiful, and really reshaped things. And I sat there thinking like, huh, little Zach before all the anxiety, before all the depression, just pure innocence. What would he say about me now, and how can I be better to make that person proud? Because if you're living in true alignment with that sense of self, I can't imagine you ever being disappointed with where your life is going. So
That was that was like a huge nugget right there that you gave, because it is and it's about the being are we making our own self our own selves proud? It's not about others'
Mm. Hmm.
approval. It's about our true self, making that trueness of ourselves, our proud of where we are. And yeah, and the alignment component, which is, I think, huge. And so many of us end up living off of alignment because we are trying to prove to others that we can, or try to fit into the society that's expecting. You said keeping up with the Millers, which I had never heard that. I had heard the Joneses. I had never
Oh,
heard the keeping
Joneses. I think that's a
the Miller
movie. That was a movie,
keep,
and I think I got
keeping keep, keeping up, but keeping up with others, that therefore ends up kind of throwing us off of our course, right? So a lot of stress, depression, all that kind of stuff can be, added because we're trying to keep up with other people's standards and not necessarily with even just our own, or our 7-year route in college. Woo-hoo!
Well, the biggest shift for me with feeling those feelings and depression, anxiety is like
Yeah.
knowing that they're actually a symptom of like a
Mm.
larger disease, or like you're saying, misalignment. So rather than like, why am I depressed? It's like, what where am I lacking right now that's causing this feeling to come up? Sitting
Yeah.
with it, exploring it, because in my mind it was like, I'm depressed, I need to fix depression. And at that point,
What's the root
you're never
cause?
gonna,
What's the
yeah,
root cause? What's
exactly,
What's it?
exactly.
Yeah, and going back to that, and then I think, and in going to that too, and in the medical field, since you're in that, is that as well, right? What is the root cause of things? Not just let's just put a Band-Aid on it, but what is really what even that caused the cancer to begin with, or
Yeah.
my mom died of cancer as well, so I
Mm.
can relate to that. So how did any of the emotions, the stress, any of those things add to the pile, as you were mentioning before? um Thank you so much for everything that you've shared and all the knowledge. Is there anything I did not ask you that you'd like to share with the listeners, and also how they can find you?
Yeah, I mean, not really. I'm again just very appreciative that you have this space for people, and I think anybody who has a story would find great power in just opening up, and you'd be surprised how many people you can connect with just by being vulnerable and being raw. Scary as it is, making that leap is the best decision I've ever made. So, um, I will leave you my Instagram and my email, and um, anybody who wants to reach out for any reason. I literally, I mean, on my LinkedIn the other day, I put a link to my calendar. I find so much pleasure in talking to other people and learning about their journey, and um, just seeing what I can learn, what I can help with. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out. And again, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And so in
Yeah.
the profile notes, go check out the details of his contact. So thank you once again, Zach. We had Zachary Faerber on the podcast today. Thank you. Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.